The following segment is sponsored by Daniel A. White and Associates. It does not necessarily reflect the views of WDEL or Forever Media. Rick Jensen on 1150 AM, 1017 FM, WDEL.
Wednesdays, right after the news at 1:30, either Dan or Andrew Wood will call in and give you some tips and advice on what's going on in the world right now. And I'm so glad because I talk to Dan on a regular basis. Last year, I made some decisions in my retirement account, and I'm really glad I did. No, I'm one of the lucky ones. I got, out of the market. Well, okay, so I've always had 80% of my rollover 401k plans into IRAs into individual stocks. And I've done quite well. I've been making more right decisions than wrong ones. And Dan and I were talking about the Fed raising interest rates, a lot of the policies coming out of the administration. I said, it might make sense to actually go heavily to cash. And he agreed. And I went to 80% cash, which is really weird for me. I never did that before. And then that was by the end of the first week of January. And I'm very blessed because I get to keep the money as opposed to losing half of it. And that's what would have happened. So I always like to hear tips from these guys because at Dan White and Associates, they do focus on retirement income planning. And that's what it's all about. Andrew, thanks for being on, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
Yeah, I see this email, the tip of the day, deferrals, suspensions, withdrawals, withholdings. And I'm thinking, that sounds like my high school trouble years. All those problems. But that's not what you're talking about, is it?
No, it's not. We do a lot of work with, obviously, retirement income. Huge part of that for a lot of people is going to be Social Security. So this is primarily going to be a Social Security kind of topic discussion. I will point out one thing. So I was just reading something this morning. Last month, they predicted cost of living adjustment for Social Security should be over 10%. It was like 10.5%. They just adjusted that number downwards. They're estimating it should be roughly 9.6% for cost of living adjustment for 2023. So still a huge increase, largest increase since 1981.
Yeah.
So for anyone that's obviously feeling the pain, whether it's at the pump or a grocery store, this is designed to help those retirees to help combat inflation.
So if somebody's working and they don't really need to take Social Security out, what's the best age to do that?
Sure. So obviously, you should know that every year that you wait to draw the income, and we would call this deferral, the deferral period, you are going to get those what we call delayed retirement credits. So, if you don't need it, ideally you're going to hold off because you're going to get more, and that's a huge benefit, especially for anyone out there that may feel like they are underfunded. The idea is if you can get more Social Security, then you won't need to have quite as much saved up because you're getting a larger check. So you're dependent less on your retirement savings. So obviously deferral is the first part, holding off as long as possible for when you do either stop working or when you do really need that income. Obviously you want that check to be as large as possible.
And you're working on the presumption, and it is, I would say, an accurate historical presumption that even when it looks like Social Security is going to run out and die, Congress will do something to change it, like making retirement age later, maybe even taxing people who are making more money than are required to put into Social Security at this time, things like that. Is that right?
That is right. And I think over the last, couple months or so, I've been on here talking about a few of the programs that they're discussing. One in particular is the Social Security Expansion Act. Hasn't been passed yet, but yeah, they're looking at increasing taxes to make this program a little bit more solvent. So, that is certainly something that is in the works.
What the heck do you mean by suspensions?
Sure. So there were some rule changes that took place a few years back. They did away with this restricted application, but there is an ability for people that are prior to age 70, if they've started receiving their checks, once they reach full retirement age, they can do what's called a suspension. They can turn those benefits off. And if you turn those benefits off, obviously you stop receiving those checks, but you will begin receiving those delayed retirement credits. So what that means is you turn it off, suspend it for a while, whether it's a year or two, sometimes even up to 3 or 4 years, you can get a larger check. So for that situation where maybe you realize that, retirement wasn't quite for me, or they wanted to, work and they were still getting a solid income, they can decide to stop those checks, suspend them, and turn them back on a larger check at a later date.
That's amazing. I have a friend who took early distribution, and he just had to. He had his own business, and he said he's tired of working doing that. He's like 62 years old. And apparently he could do that, I guess. But it was a smaller amount of money. So he gets another job and he's making money. He could actually suspend that, work for a few more years, and then get more money when he retires for real.
Right. Now there's a couple things there. So the first thing is you can't do a suspension until you've reached full retirement age. So for most people, that's 66 in a few months, or 67 and beyond.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So that would be the suspension option. Now, situation like that, let's say you haven't reached full retirement age yet. The other option we could look at is what we call withholding. And this isn't something that's voluntary. It's involuntary, meaning, if you're making over a certain amount of money prior to full retirement age, you end up paying benefits back. For every $2 of income for 2020 that you make over $19,560, you end up paying a benefit back. Now, that said, so for any month that you pay back, or any month that you don't receive a check because your income was too high, and this is, again, prior to full retirement age, those months that you forfeit or withhold, those months are getting put back into the equation, back into the formula. So once you do reach full retirement age, yes, you'll get a higher check because you forfeited those months of payments.
Good to know. You also want to talk about withdrawals, huh?
And that's the last one. So for anyone who has started receiving those checks, you file for your benefits, and maybe, I don't know, you just didn't, you weren't aware of all the rules, you weren't really in tune with your situation, because things obviously do change, work situation, things like that. You do have, within the first 12 months of filing, you can withdraw your application.
Oh.
All right. So, yeah, you can basically pay back your benefits. Now, just be aware of this. This is a one-time opportunity. You have to do it within the first 12 months of filing, but it can take up to 5 months.
Really?
All right, to actually have that withdrawal request process. So while this is in process, you will continue to receive those checks, and once it gets processed, then they're going to tell you basically what you have to repay, because you were receiving checks. You're basically saying, look, I didn't want them. You have to repay those checks. But yeah, you can basically start fresh as if you never had filed at all.
Under what situation might somebody do that?
Sure. So could be a situation where maybe a spouse was sick, for example.
Oh.
They stayed home, we're taking care of them. Whether they got better or not, they might say, okay, I'm going to go back to work. They weren't quite ready yet. That type of situation. Or, maybe someone had gotten laid off from a job and weren't quite ready to retire yet. So, they said, okay, well, I'm paycheck stop, right? I'm going to need some income. I'm going to file for my check. Maybe they find a job or they want to go back, in that type of situation. They won't necessarily need it because they have the income, so they might decide to turn the Social Security check off.
Andrew, this is why you guys are awesome, because these are things that most of us wouldn't even think about, and yet there are people, here in Delaware and Pennsylvania that this happens to and wouldn't even think about, something like this, but then give a call to you over there at Dan White & Associates, say, oh, yeah, we know how to fix this. That's awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate you being on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rick.
That's Andrew Wood with Dan White & Associates, specialized in retirement income planning. Oh, one more thing. Every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, Dan's on this radio station with his program On the Money, Sunday at 7 a.m. The title is We're in a Recession, Whether the Government Admits It or Not. And knowing Dan, he's also going to add what to do about it. All right, Andrew, thanks so much, buddy. Take care.
You too. Thanks, Rick.
All right, they're at 888-690-8820.